He fed them first, housed them second, and never once mentioned marriage. The stew was already on when I heard the wagon. I hadn't cooked for company. I'd cooked because it was Tuesday, and on Tuesday I made whatever I had enough of, and this particular Tuesday that was a shank of elk I'd brought down 3 days prior and a half sack of dried pinto beans that had been sitting in my larder since winter. I was stirring the pot with a long-handled wooden spoon my wife had brought from Ohio 11 years before she died, and I heard the squeak of an axle out on the road and didn't think much of it. People used that road. I used that road. It went south toward Guthrie and north toward nothing, and travelers on it weren't my business unless they turned off onto my land. They turned off. I set the spoon across the pot, went to the window and looked out. A wagon, 1 mule, and a canvas top that had started to sag on the left side like it was giving up. The mule looked like it had been walking since April. The woman on the bench had her shoulders squared in that particular way women square their shoulders when they're holding something together by will alone. There were 2 kids in the back. I could see their heads over the side rail, 2 small heads, closed together. I went outside. She didn't get down. People who have reason to be afraid of men don't get down right away. I understood that. I stood at the bottom of the porch steps with my thumbs in my belt and waited. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. Her voice was steady, but she was watching my hands the way you watch a dog you're not sure about. The wheel on the left rear, the rims cracked. I don't know if it'll hold another 10 miles. "It won't," I said, because I could see it from where I was standing. A half-inch crack running up toward the spoke joint. Roll that another 10 miles on this road and it'd come apart under her. "I have money," she said quickly, like she needed to say it before I said anything else. I didn't ask. She looked at me a moment, then she looked at the house, then back at me. "There's a town," she said, "South Guthrie. 14 miles. She sat with that. The smaller of the 2 kids. I could see now it was a girl, maybe 4 or 5, with dark braids, put her chin on the side rail and looked at me with the frank, assessing stare that small children have before they learn to hide it. "You got a name?" I asked the woman. "Vera Marsh." A pause. "Widow Marsh, I suppose, is what they call me now. It's been 6 months. 6 months. That's still raw. 6 months you're still waking up and forgetting for a half-second before you remember." "Elias Cutter," I said. "I've got a barn. Mule can rest, you can look at the wheel in the morning, see what it needs. I've got stew on." She looked at me again with that measuring look. A woman alone with 2 children learns to measure fast or she doesn't last. "Why?" she said. It was a fair question. I thought about it honestly for a second. "Because the stew's already made and there's more than I'll eat," I said. "And because your mule looks like he might lie down and refuse to get up, and I'd hate to have that on my conscience." The little girl on the rail laughed. Just a short, surprised sound like she hadn't meant to. The woman, Vera, turned and looked at the girl, and something in her face went soft for just a moment before she looked back at me. "All right," she said, "thank you." That first night, I fed them at my table and said almost nothing. The boy was older, 8 or 9, I figured, and he sat with his back straight the way boys do when they're trying to act like the man of the thing. His name was Calvin. He ate carefully and didn't take more than he thought was offered. The girl was Nora, and she ate like she'd been hungry, which I suspected she had. Vera watched them eat before she ate herself, and she didn't do it consciously. It was just the order of things for her now. After supper, I showed her the small room off the back of the house, where my hired man had slept before I let him go the previous spring. 2 cots in there. The kids could sleep on those and she could have my bed. I'd sleep in the barn. "That's your bed," she said. "I've slept in worse than a barn." "We can't put you out of your own." "Mrs. Marsh," I said, "I'm not being put out, I'm choosing, there's a difference." I handed her the lamp. "There's a lock on the inside of the back room door. The main house door latches from inside too. Sleep." She took the lamp. In the light of it, I could see how tired she was. Not just tonight tired, but the bone-deep tired of someone who'd been holding everything up for months without being spelled. "Thank you, Mr. Cutter," she said. "Elias." She nodded. "Elias." I went to the barn. In the morning, I looked at the wheel. The rim was cracked through worse than I'd thought. The canvas cover had kept the rain off it enough that the wood hadn't swollen to close the crack, and there was a hairline running up into the hub that I didn't like the look of. I could band it with iron as a temporary measure, but the hub needed replacing. I told her so over coffee. I had real coffee that morning, the good kind, because I'd been saving it for no particular reason, and this seemed like one. She took the news without flinching. "How long?" "I can have the hub turned by the end of the week if I work it steady. Rim's a different matter. I'd need to ride to Guthrie for the stock iron, and that's a day there and back." "I can pay for the iron," she said immediately. "We'll talk about that later." She set her cup down. "No," she said. "We'll talk about it now. I'm not a charity case, Mr. Cutter. I have $42, that's what I have. My husband died without a will that held up in court, and his brother took the house and most of what was in it, and I am $42 and a cracked wagon wheel away from starting over. But I am not nothing, and I won't be treated like it." I looked at her across the table. The morning light was coming in the east window, and it hit the side of her face and showed the line of her jaw, which was set. "I didn't say you were nothing," I said. "I said we'd talk about it later, because the cost of the iron and a half week of my time to fix your wheel don't amount to what $42 is worth to a woman starting over, and I'd rather fix the wheel and have you owe me a favor than have you lighter by $10. She looked at me for a moment. "What kind of favor?" she said, and there was a careful steadiness in the question. "Whatever kind you've got to offer that isn't a hardship," I said. "Can you cook?" A pause, something in her face shifted. "Yes," she said. "Then cook while you're here. I've been eating my own cooking for 11 years, and it's tolerable, but it's not good." She was quiet for a second, then careful as setting down glass. "That's all." "That's all." She picked up her coffee cup. Didn't say anything else. But when Calvin came in and asked if there were chores he could do, she didn't stop him, and I set him to mucking the stall, and later I heard her in the kitchen starting something on the stove, and the whole house smelled different by midday than it had in 11 years. She stayed a week, then another. I don't know exactly how it happened. The hub took longer than I'd said because I found dry rot in the wheel bed itself and had to replace more of the frame, and that was true, but I'll admit I didn't rush it. And she didn't ask me to. She settled into the kitchen like she'd always known where things were. She didn't know, but she figured it out quick and made no fuss about it. And Calvin helped me with the stock in the mornings, and Nora followed me around for approximately 3 days before she decided I was trustworthy and started talking to me like we'd been acquainted for years. She told me about a crow she'd seen. She told me she'd had a dog once named Button who'd got into a porcupine, and her father had to pull the quills out one by one, and the dog cried the whole time. She told me that Calvin was scared of thunder but wouldn't say so. She told me I had dirt on my ear. I told her she was right, and I wiped it off. Vera watched all of this from a distance, the way she watched most things. She was a watchful woman. Not in a frightened way, exactly, more like a woman who'd been surprised before and had decided she'd rather see things coming. I understood that too. The third week she started repairing a section of fence along the east pasture without being asked. I saw her out there in the morning with a post driver and a coil of wire, and I stood in the yard and watched her for a moment. The way she set the post, checked the line, drove it clean, and then I went and got a second post driver and worked the section from the other end. We didn't say much while we worked. That was all right. Some of the best company I've ever kept has been mostly quiet. When we met in the middle and the last post was set, she straightened and pushed her hair back from her face and looked at the fence line. You do good work, I said. My father ran cattle, she said, before the drought took it. Mine too, Panhandle. She glanced at me. You don't seem like a Panhandle man. It takes a while to shake off. She almost smiled, not quite but almost. The fourth week, on a Sunday, I rode to Guthrie for the stock iron. I was gone a day and a half. When I came back, the house had been aired out, windows open, curtains washed, the smell of lye soap and something baking underneath it. The yard had been swept. The two rocking chairs on the porch that I'd been meaning to sand and re-oil for 3 years had been sanded and re-oiled, and looked better than they had when I built them. I stood in the yard with the iron in the wagon and looked at all of it. Then I went inside. She was at the stove. She didn't turn around, just said, "Supper's in an hour if you want to wash up." You re-oiled the porch chairs, I said. They were drying out. I've been meaning to do that for 3 years. I know, she said. You told Calvin. I hadn't known he'd pass that on. I stood there a moment. Vera, I said. She turned. She had a dish towel in her hands and she was looking at me straight, the way she always did, with that level, watchful look that never quite became a wall. I'm not. I stopped. Started again. I want you to know I haven't been slow with the wheel to hold you here, if that's what you're wondering. She was quiet for a moment. I know, she said. I just want that to be clear. It's clear, she said. I know the difference between a man working slow to trap a woman and a man working careful because he does things right. She paused. You do things right. I didn't know what to say to that. I'm not sure I've ever been said that to in exactly that way, not as a thing meant to get something, just as an observation, a plain statement of what she'd seen. I nodded, put my hat on the peg, went to wash up. I finished the wheel on a Wednesday. I told her Thursday morning, over breakfast. Set my coffee cup down and told her the wheel was done. The hub was solid. The rim was banded and seated right, and she could load up whenever she was ready. She looked at her plate. Calvin looked at his plate. Nora said, I don't want to go. Nora, Vera said quietly. Well, I don't. She looked at me with the full, unguarded honesty of a 5-year-old. Do you want us to go? I looked at Vera. She was still looking at her plate. No, I said, I don't want you to go. The kitchen was very quiet for a moment. Vera looked up. Her eyes were steady, but there was something working in them. The $42, she said. What about it? It's enough to start with if we go to Oklahoma City. There's work there for women who can sew, and I can sew. Calvin's old enough to help. We'd manage. I know you'd manage, I said. I've watched you for a month. You'd manage anything. She was quiet. But, she said. But you'd be managing alone, I said, and you don't have to. She looked at me a long time. I could hear the fire in the stove, a low tick of wood settling. Outside, a meadowlark was going on about something in the east pasture. You haven't asked me anything, she said. In 4 weeks you haven't asked me a single thing I didn't offer first. No, I said, I haven't. Why? I thought about how to say it. Because you came here with nothing but $42 and 2 children and a cracked wheel, and you were holding yourself together with both hands. Because a woman in that place doesn't need a man adding to what she has to carry. She needs, I stopped. She needs to get her feet under her first, figure out what she wants, not be maneuvered into something before she's had a chance to think. Vera put down her fork. She looked at me for a long moment with those steady gray eyes. I've had a chance to think, she said. 4 weeks is a long time to think. I didn't say anything. I've thought about Oklahoma City, she said. I've thought about what it would look like to start over there, rented rooms and sewing work and managing. She paused. And I've thought about this. This, I said. This place, this house. Another pause, quieter, you. Nora had stopped eating and was watching us with great seriousness. You do things right, Vera said again, the same way she'd said it before. You didn't ask me for anything. You fed my children. You fixed my wheel. You slept in your own barn so my kids could have a roof. You worked that fence with me and didn't once make me feel like I owed you for it. Her voice was steady, but something in it had gone very careful. I have known men who would have done all that and kept a running tally. I know the difference. It wasn't a tally, I said. I know it wasn't. She folded her hands on the table. That's why I'm still here. I'm going to tell you about the moment I remember most. It wasn't that morning at the table. That morning mattered, that morning I'll carry to my grave. But the moment I mean came a little later, after Calvin had taken Nora outside and we were still sitting there, just the two of us, the plates between us going cold. She stood up to clear them. I stood too, and we were both reaching for the same plate, and we ended up standing close enough that I could have reached out and touched her. I didn't. I held still. She looked up at me from that distance, not far, and she reached out and put her hand flat on my chest. Not grabbing, not pulling, just her palm against my shirt over my heart, like she was feeling whether there was something there worth feeling. I put my hand over hers. That was all. We stood there for a moment, her hand under mine, and it was the most particular feeling I have ever had in my life. Not like being young again. Not like anything I could have written down or explained to another man over a whiskey. It was more like being known. Being found out to be exactly what you are, not more and not less, and having that be enough. Having that be, in fact, the whole thing. She looked at me, and I looked at her, and we didn't say a word. And I don't think we needed to. We were married in the fall, 6 weeks after that morning. No ceremony. I'm not a ceremony man, and she didn't want one. We rode to Guthrie, signed the papers in front of the justice, rode home. Calvin was with the stock that afternoon, and when we came back he looked at us and seemed to understand without being told. He nodded at me in a way that was very old for a 9-year-old boy, and I nodded back. And that was that. Nora asked if I was her father now. I said that was up to her. She thought about it for about 4 seconds and said yes, and that was that too. I'm telling you this because there's a version of the story I could tell you where the point is that I did something good. The noble thing. Took in a woman in need and fixed her wheel and gave her a roof and didn't ask for payment. But that's not the point. The point is what Vera said to me that morning. You do things right. A man gets older, and the world gives him a lot of messages about where he stands. Whether he's useful, whether his way of doing things steady, patient, no announcement amounts to much, whether anyone notices. There are stretches, long ones, where the answer seems to be no. Nobody notices. Nobody particularly needs what you have to offer. You do things right and the world goes on not caring whether you did or not. And then a woman lays her hand on your chest and looks at you, and you understand that somebody saw. Not because you performed, not because you asked to be seen, because you just were who you are, did what you do, and it turned out to be exactly what a good woman was looking for. That's the whole of it. That's the thing I'd want to say if someone asked me to say one thing. She's out in the garden right now. I can see her through the kitchen window. The light's going orange and flat the way it does in October out here, and she's got her hair up, and she's talking to Nora about something. I can see Nora's hands going the way they do when she's worked up about something, and Calvin is coming in from the south pasture on the gray horse, and the stew's on the stove, her recipe not mine, and the house smells like it has a person in it. I built this place 11 years ago with my own hands. I've kept it up since. It was always a good house. It just needed someone to come home to.